SEC nerds are into baseball right now, no doubt about that, including our guy, Chris Phillips. But we're going to pin him down for some South Carolina football here. You can catch Chris on SEC Unfiltered, or as I just learned, you can just go with SECU. Chris, what's going on today?
Mark, it's always great to chat with you, my friend. Yeah, you mentioned during baseball season, it's baseball season. During basketball season, it's basketball season. But it's football season 24/7, 365. So, yeah, we're in the thick, obviously, the college baseball postseason beginning today as we speak with the regionals getting going, 11 SEC teams beginning that road to Omaha. But, Mark, I'm always down to talk some college football, man. It's never too early, and we're exactly 90 days away from kickoff. Before you know it, we're going to be in Dallas for SEC Media Days, and then fall camp will start and kickoff will be here, Mark. So always a pleasure, man. Excited to chat with you.
I got to say, Chris, that during this offseason, South Carolina has been a bit under the radar. No big splashes in regards to transfer portal, anything like that in particular. As you look at this team as we head toward August, based on what you saw in the spring, any big position battles, storylines that you're looking out for?
And Mark, to your point, I think the biggest splash that they made in the transfer portal was way earlier in the cycle in December when they landed Rocket Sanders. That was the big one, right? That was the headliner. That was the name that folks will recognize. Outside of that, they landed a couple wide receivers that were seldom used at their previous stops. Some of them were highly regarded prospects, but just not flashy names. I love the guys they landed in the front seven, a couple linebackers and defensive linemen from the ACC and other places as well. I think they're more athletic there. So in regards to position battles, Mark, Shane Beamer has named Lenoris Sellers the starting quarterback, which I don't think is a surprise, but they didn't do that until he went to a Gamecock Club meeting or something like that a couple weeks after the spring game. And he mentioned that battle is going to continue. But, Mark, I think we all agree that Lenoris Sellers is the guy for this football team. I think the biggest position battle, Mark, that South Carolina fans are keeping an eye on, I'm keeping an eye on as well, is the wide receiver position. Who steps up at wide receiver one? And you would think to yourself, well, that's going to be Nick Harbor. Well, Nick Harbor has been busy with track stuff, and he may not even be available to play until like midway through the season, depending on what happens with the Olympics and running track. And this is something they knew when they signed him, but it does put Shane Beamer in this South Carolina offense and Dabble Loggins, the offensive coordinator, in a really tough spot. And there's not a receiver, Mark, on this football team that returns from last year that had more than 12 catches. Now, again, they added a couple transfer portal guys. They added a kid from Miami of Ohio who was pretty good last year. They added a kid that was a freshman at Florida State last year that was highly regarded. But they don't have anybody on this roster that is a Juice Wells. They don't even have anybody that's a Xavier Legette, who, even though he was seldom used, you knew he had the potential to be productive in the SEC. I don't know that they have anybody right now on the roster that's like that. So who's going to be Lenoris Sellers' top target on the outside? I would say the wide receiver position. That's the top position battle. Outside of that, it's figuring out both lines of scrimmage, what's the rotation going to be. But that wide receiver battle, I think, is the one that fans are keeping the closest eye on going into fall camp.
You mentioned some of these new guys coming in through the transfer portal. Once you put those guys together with this incoming freshman class for 24, who are those list of players that you think could make an impact?
Well, I think immediately Dylan Stewart on the defensive front. I think that's the big one, right? He comes off the edge. This kid was a five-star recruit. Everybody wanted him, right? South Carolina beat out a long list of really formidable suitors to land his services, and he looked really impressive throughout the spring, right? Again, he's a big kid, physical. I think he could be the next NFL defensive lineman drafted out of South Carolina. Outside of that, again, Gage Larvadane was a name at the wide receiver position. Also, the kid they picked up from Coastal Carolina, whose name for whatever reason is escaping me at the moment. They picked up three receivers specifically. Larvadane, I think it was a Louisville transfer. They picked up a Miami of Ohio transfer. They picked up a Florida State transfer. Jared Brown is the Coastal Carolina transfer. I apologize. Also, Oscar Attaway from North Texas at the running back position, I think, is going to provide great depth. And I think he could be your RB1 if Rocket Sanders is still kind of carrying over some of the injury problems that held him out of spring, actually. And, he brought over from Arkansas. Jawarn Howell from South Carolina State's a guy they're really excited about. Hey, talking about transfers, does Robbie Ashford have a role in this football team? That's a question that I have. The Lenoris Sellers is QB1. When you have a quarterback that's going to run as much as he does, you definitely have to have a capable guy behind him. How much of Robbie Ashford did we see? He was really good in the red zone for Auburn. Is he like a red zone threat for South Carolina. Outside of that, man, you look at defensively, I think most of these guys, Kyle Kennard is one that comes in via the transfer portal, the transfer from Georgia Tech. That's a guy that I was really high on. DeAndre Jules from Pittsburgh is another one I think fans need to keep an eye on. And, of course, you have those other returners on the defensive front. So I think they got more athletic at the linebacker position. I think they're much faster. The secondary is going to be a bunch of guys you already know, you already heard of. Nicky Manwari, DQ Smith, Jelon Kilgore, and O'Donnell Fortune back for them as well. So it's a mix of young and old, Mark. It is. And, of course, it's spearheaded by your young quarterback, which is redshirt freshman Lenore Sellers, and a lot of this season is going to depend on his play and, of course, how well his offensive line protects him.